Macho, John, Ned, and Juanito in Acapulco, Mexico. I like to say that I push the button when God tells me to push the button because I've got something to say. That's basically true this time, but also I don't know if it was God told me to push the button. I know I'm about to lose my energy and it's sagging and I'm heading towards sleep and I want to capture this while I still can. I'm in a nice apartment. It's brand new. No one else has ever lived in it. My friend Marcos built it from scratch. It's bare. There's no windows. I sit in the doorway. He talks about putting a window in right there. And there's stuff exposed. These are wires he put in so that my shower could be heated, which I don't think anybody else in my part of the Pueblo has warm water in their shower. So I want to talk about poverty, physical poverty, like being broke. I have a PhD in clinical psychology and worked for 4 years for AT&T at the height of its glory, doing high-level management consulting, and then made even more money as a freelancer with Arthur Andersen when it was the gold standard of accounting. And Andersen Consulting, their consulting wing, was by far the largest consulting firm in the world. Yeah, at my best, I had a gig with Arthur Andersen Consulting where I was making $2,000 a day. Now, that's not every day, but it was 2 weeks, 14 days every 2 months. It was pretty good money. So my biggest years, I grossed over 100,000, which was not chump change and not rich. But in my early 40s, I experienced a perfect storm of life crises that broke me as a person. And I know now that if I had been taken to a spiritual teacher, they could have said, good, let's get to work now. You've realized that career isn't where it's at and your family stuff has fallen apart. Let's help you dig into who you really are. But no, that doesn't happen in most Western societies. And I'll put a link to Stanislav Grof. The way he says it is, you get taken to the closest thing there are to spiritual leaders. The gods of Western society are the doctors, and they'll take you to the psychiatrist. And they gave me a diagnosis, even though I was a clinical psychologist myself who had always fought diagnoses. And I accepted it because I was so desperate for help. And they gave me drugs, which 30 years never helped. So for the next 30 years, I was not unemployable. I did contract work, but at a much lower rate and nothing like full-time. So the resentment I have still is with the psychiatric establishment and Big Pharma in cahoots. And with the rich. And now it's fresh. It's real fresh because I watched a video last night of Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, saying this budget that you Republicans are putting forward, what it positions us to do, if we were to go along with it, is to finance the tax cuts for the rich by stripping the social safety net from the poor. That's where you're wanting to make up the money, is by cutting Medicaid. I think he said get rid of Medicaid and cutting other programs for the poor. And Donald Trump conned the working people of America into believing he was on their side when he never was. His constituents were always the billionaires. And that's been the Republican dodge for a long time. And it's also been the dodge of the rich around the world. They used to get away with it in Mexico for generations. The PRI party, the party of the rich, ran that same scam here in Mexico. But then AMLO won, Manuel Lopez Obrador, and he turned it on its head. He was there for the workers and brought in social safety net and won just the love of the people. And this last time around, the election was in June, And even though all the other parties came together to beat Claudia Sheinbaum, AMLO's understudy and a spectacular politician and woman, she got an 80% landslide. So that scam is not working in Mexico. It has fallen flat. And Mexico has a long tradition of honoring the peasants. Long tradition. It goes back and forth, but it's in there. It's in the Mexican blood to stick up for the worker. Democrats are the party for the worker, but they sold out too much. They sold too much of their own soul, chasing the big buck donors, and never got a coherent message together about. Kamala said, I will bust the monopolies. And Biden said, we will tax the rich, but they didn't say it clearly enough. And they were too much in the hip pocket of the rich themselves, too compromised. So here's my dinner, Sabritas. I have, for my 4.5 years of travel in Asheville, North Carolina for 16 years, I always had a part-time job at points, full-time. Working class hero I was always meant to be. Made no attempt to be a management consultant or a psychologist. Did frontline customer service and loved it because that's my roots. It's very working class. I had a ball. But on the road, I never have been able to have a part-time job, so I've been poor and survived a lot on the deep pockets of a few friends. And about 1.5 years into my travels, all of those pockets tightened up, and I had to do it my own. And I tell elsewhere the stories of how I did it, and I'm proud of myself. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into it now. It meant dropping the shackles of the middle class completely and doing what I had to do. I will not steal from the poor. No. If all the shoplifting I did at Walmart in the United States was coming out of the pockets of those workers who were being paid like $8 an hour, I wouldn't have done it. No, but it wasn't. Yeah, and there's other stories too. Yeah, so I've done it, but by the skin of my pants. And even here in Mexico, where the cost of living is easier, I had a camper van that was incredibly expensive to keep on the road. And then I was in hotels and hostels, really expensive. I'm finally at the place where if I manage to get out to the people some healing programs that I'm dying to offer, because I have healing to offer, if I find the way, and I've been trying to use YouTube for a long time to get my teaching out, and haven't cracked the code how to really. On TikTok I had 1,000 followers, but people my age don't follow TikTok. So that's the frustration. I have bottomless love to offer and a lot of understanding of how to heal. A lot of understanding of how to heal. And moving to Tulum soon, because there's people with money and people with sophistication and people who speak English, and potentially a market for what I have to offer. But meanwhile, in Mexico, when I was a kid, my mom worked at a grocery store in the 50s and 60s, where they would let the working class run a tab for the month and pay when they got their check. In Mexico, I've always worked that deal. Everywhere I've been for 3 months or more, there's always been a restaurant and or a grocery store. So here in Akumal, I had a restaurant and a grocery store. Had a restaurant, but pissed off the owner, so I get no hot food. It's been weeks since I've really had hot food. There's a great old guy who sells tamales in the square off his bicycle cart for 25 pesos, and that's a hell of a deal. But I didn't have 25 pesos. I had to go to the store where they're letting me run a tab, and they did have the big pack of Sabritas, which I love. They're the world's great potato chip. Prefer them with avocados, which are plentiful. They're local, but I couldn't afford 20 pesos for an avocado. I prefer them with bananas, prefer them with decent cheese. The store I go to has barely decent cheese, not good cheese. But I'm running too much of a tab. I had to cut a limit as to what I bought today. And so today's just, I've done worse. I've done worse. In Mexico, I've gone days without eating. So it's great. And I keep saying, God has not decided to get me affluent yet because I haven't learned what I'm needing to learn about being with the people. I mean, I'm poorer than most of the people in this pueblo, but it keeps my feet on the ground and keeps me from thinking my shit doesn't stink, No, I'm with the people, and I think God, I've got it now, so it's okay if I bring in a little extra money. Okay, thanks. Bye.